are live.
Unmute. Hello and welcome to Alaafia Educational Live event. Alaafia is a safe space dedicated for women to share their thoughts on issues affecting women. This event aims to raise public awareness about human trafficking and to educate the community on preventing it. I am your host, Dr. Ebere Azuma. We have two speakers for today's event, Lashandra and Omotola. These women are leaders in anti-human trafficking, and it is so fortunate to have them here today providing this free educational webinar for each of us. For all of our listeners and attendees, please don't forget to drop all your questions in the comment section on today on Facebook or YouTube. Again, this is an educational opportunity for each of you to ask a question. Our guest speaker is Lashandra Venon. She's one of the few people who worked to get a human trafficking law, and she is a strong advocate globally. She is talking on the topic, understanding human trafficking. Lashandra, welcome to Alaafia Educational Live. How are you, Lashandra?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here today. Remind me again where you coming from, because we are all over now since we are global.
Yes, I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay. How is the weather out there?
Oh, it's snowing. It's snowing a lot right now.
Oh, wow. How many inches have you guys gotten?
I think we may be close to 10.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Please stay safe. Please stay warm and drive safely.
I'm indoors.
All right. So Lashandra, please tell us today why you worked hard to create a law against human trafficking. Is there a reason? Is there a background? We're just here today to learn from you on understanding human trafficking. So tell us how you got started. Thank you.
Sure. So I do have a bit of a presentation that I can provide. So I'm going to share screen. I think I have permission.
If not, we're going to give you permission.
So it is disabled. So if someone can give me permission, I will share screen.
1 second, participant. Now you're a host. Go ahead.
Got it.
So be able to share screen. Thank you.
All right. So I am going to provide a quick presentation to kind of talk about some of the work that I have been a part of around eradicating trafficking in persons, but there are both local and global implications specifically of how we can make change for people. I got involved both locally and globally, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can do that as citizens. So the most important thing you want to do is define the words that you are using to describe situations. Also get a good understanding of the legal ramifications of global laws and local laws and how the two intersect, and how peace movements over time have played a very significant role in changing human rights violations with bodies like the United Nations. And so how those acts can help you to advance any issues around human rights, because many of those resolutions are already written, which brings up the example of how I, along with many here in Milwaukee, was able to establish a task force combating human trafficking in Milwaukee using the very resolutions that were addressed at the United Nations level on trafficking. And so this is the definition. So the process is the recruitment, transportation, transferring, harboring, or receiving by way of threat, coercion, abduction, force, fraud, deceit, deception, or abuse of power to prostitute someone, produce pornography, create violence and exploitation, forced labor, So a lot of times we leave out the forced labor that is not sex trafficking, but it is a very significant way that people are impacted. It also includes things like debt bondage, people coming to America and being given the impression that they are free, but getting here and finding out that there is a debt that they hadn't paid that they have to work off. And so some of these are the things, and let's call a thing, slavery. At the core, this definition is something that the United States has not yet ratified, and holds many other nations responsible for ratifying. And so we must, as the citizens of this place, in the case of those of us that are in the United States, we must be working within that government to demand that they work towards ending this crime against humanity. So if you've done any work in domestic violence services, social work, rescue houses, there's a tool called the power and control wheel that's discussed when women or men come into a shelter after experiencing abuse. And that same cycle of power and control exists within trafficking conditions. They overlap almost completely. The only difference is we've identified some as being less menacing in the case of marriages. But the truth of the matter is the means in which people are oppressed look the same for a domestic violence or intimate partner relationship as they do for someone who is trafficked. So I was engaged with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in working with the United States to create the National Action Plan to implement Women, Peace, and Security Act. We did this work, didn't get everything that we asked for in that work, but it was some of the fastest turnaround that I've ever seen from the US State Department on actually coming close to ratifying a treaty. That has not 100% hit the mark, but it has happened. And so it is proof that we can do it more frequently. And those plans gave way for things like the task forces that exist today. It all started though because Madeline Rees was the whistleblower that identified that a United States contractor was trafficking people in and out of the United States, but had immunity because they were a contractor. And so there was a film made about this. There are several films that have been created with similar storylines, but this specific situation is the reason why we advanced the Women, Peace, and Security Act, because we were in direct violation of giving that contractor immunity as the United States. So peace processes can either be formal or informal. And so in my experiences, I've been part of both. I think everyone should be engaged in both. The informal practices are often, we see a thing, we say it's wrong, we tell our friends come together and we stand against it. But more formal peace processes involving yourselves in NGO status with the United Nations, going and testifying, writing shadow reports on things that have not been ratified in the nation that you live in, and demanding that they make change in ways that will impact humanity. And so there is a federal task force. They have also a joint task force that is working with the feds, but also with places like Sojourner Family Peace Center. But then there's also a community task force that exists, and that task force has public meetings. It sits at the city of Milwaukee, but it was really initiated at the county. And so we could have gone a whole lot further with Women, Peace, and Security Act. And so I challenge all of us listening to this webinar to think about what we haven't done yet, how much further we could take some of the resolution implications into law. What can we do on city levels to use human rights models that really work? Look at the 17 sustainability goals for the United Nations. Look at things that exist already for us to make sure that we can create a just world and just society. These are some of the things that were recommended, most of which came into the legislation in some ways, but not all of it. One of the things that was important is civil society had the opportunity to testify. I was able to help Mount Mary. We hosted a community feedback session where people could come and talk about some of the issues they've had personally in human rights violations as women. And of course, because Mount Mary is a college that is extremely diverse, there were people from all cultural backgrounds. Lots of immigrant women came to talk about their experiences coming to the United States after being in a hostile situation where they'd come from. And so there's been a lot of real impact that we could have by them being able to be present, but then also just real conversations about what we could do more of. We still didn't meet the mark. There's still more that needs to be done, but we've made strides over the last 10 years. And so this is a link to the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Milwaukee, their page. They are a great source to get updated on what's going on in Milwaukee around trafficking, around prevention. All of the nonprofits that serve trafficking victims in Milwaukee participate, but then also social serving agencies, because once people flee a situation, they need all the services. So all the social service agencies, some Justice Department folks attend, just a really thoughtful group of people coming together, trying to identify shared solutions. And so that is all that I had to share today. So I'm going to stop my share. And so I did the work that I shared about over a course of maybe 10 years. It started out mostly around shadow reports. The first shadow report I participated in wasn't on trafficking. It was actually on the elimination of racial discrimination, and it was specific to juvenile justice systems and how they have been a pipeline to prisons in our state. And so we did a shadow report identifying some of the challenges in our city and our state that needed to be changed to be on the right side of equality.
Hi, wow. That was so amazing. Thank you again for that. I am so grateful. So our next participant is Omotola. So Omotola, we're going to be having you join the conversation. Then after that, we're going to go to a group conversation, and hopefully our attendees at home would have submitted some questions. And even if they don't, I have a lot of questions for you. But again, Lashandra, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for being a shadow reporter. Thank you for being a part of the Human Trafficking Task Force. We really appreciate you. So, Ms. Omotola, you've worked so hard to reduce human trafficking worldwide. You're going to be talking about human trafficking painted in migration. So welcome to Alaafia Educational Monthly Seminar. Thank you, Ms. Omotola.
Thank you, Dr. Berry, for having me.
Yes, ma'am.
Human trafficking, my first encounter with it was sometime in 2008, 2018, when I was invited to serve as a consultant to an organization in Hong Kong to attempt to prevent people from entering slavery by educating them about how to identify foreign recruiters, how to identify traffickers who masquerade as job recruitment agents, travel agents, tour agents. But at that time, I didn't fully understand the scope of the problem and the depth it's eating into the fabric of society. My team and I spent 6 months actively on ground, and then paperwork the other, mapping just one particular community, then in Lagos, Nigeria. That's Lagos Island. Our work went through schools, went to 15 markets, went to schools, churches. But the conversations that we had with all the people enlightened us and kept me awake at night. I was scared about the number of people who were exiting, the means and the channels through which they were exiting. And a lot of the people that we spoke to made us understand, I have not seen my brother in the last 8 years. I have not spoken to my sister in the last 5 years. She left, she told us she was going to Dubai. We haven't seen her. So that's what triggered my interest. At that time, I had not identified a particular victim. Then we ran into a victim in February who was who was courted online by a boyfriend, asked to come to Togo, and from Togo flew her to Malaysia. But before she left Nigeria, she was asked to take a comprehensive medical test. She thought was supposed to be for whatever job she was promised. On arriving there, she was again courted, pampered, prepared for the mission, which was organ harvesting. And then one day she woke up on a hospital bed to discover had had a surgery done for which she didn't know why. And then the boyfriend who she was with said, "Oh, we had an accident." Okay, if we had an accident, how come you are still okay? He said, "Well, you had a worse cut and we had to rush you in." But what happened was he had spiked her drink at a bar that they both went to. They had taken out some organs from her. At the time, she didn't know which particular organs, but she found out she kept getting weak, getting tired, and so went into some form of care over 2 months, and then eventually said, "I want to return to Nigeria so I can be with my family. My mom should be able to take care of me." At that time, they were done with her, and the boyfriend was happy to ship her back home. We met her in February. She eventually died in March.
Oh gosh.
What had happened was they had taken out one of her kidneys, they had taken out her liver, and two other things I can't recall their names now, that were harvested from her. She didn't know. We met this person on Facebook. When we're trying to track, how did you go? There were no links to them because she had no pictures, nothing. We couldn't even identify the person. That's on organ harvesting. So that's really got my interest. I became very concerned. But again, I really didn't know what to do. But God would be kind in 2019 when someone reached out via Instagram. She was a 27-year-old Nigerian who said, "I'm a graduate of English language. I was told there was a job for me in Dubai, which would pay me $2,000 a month, which I applied for. Charged me $1,000 to process this opportunity. But when we got on the plane, we arrived in Dubai only for him to tell me that we were proceeding to Oman. Arriving in Oman, there was an agent waiting to receive her who would take her and a group of 35 other girls to what is called an agency house. They would stay there for 3 days where they would shave their hair, wash them with special baths and all kinds of dehumanizing things. And then they are now shipped to the people who have paid for them. At this point in time, until the girls arrived, they didn't know someone had paid for them as it were to work as domestic slaves. Arriving there after working for a month, hoping to earn $2,000, found out she was going to be earning $150 a month. And then she flipped. And then I called him, the slave master said, "Well, look, I paid 15,000 naira, $15,000 to bring you here. I will get full value for my money. You're supposed to be here for 3 to 5 years for me to get full value for what I paid for." Crying out, she tried to reach different people and then they got in touch with us. Work with her, we had to do a lot of things, some of which I'll say, like we had to ask her, "Look, you have to pretend you have kidney failure. So start urinating every day till you irritate them and they push you out of the house." Then we needed to walk through immigration to get her out because there's in the Middle East, there's something called the kafala system that ties the employee to the employer. So they are one unit. She can't decide to leave. If she wants to leave, she needs to return to the agency that brought her back for that separation to happen, and then she'll be relocated to another family. She can't just up and leave. Her passport is seized. She owns nothing, no medicals, no bank accounts. She doesn't, she's as it were, she's a product that is just being sold and moved from one point to the other. Thankfully, we're able to walk through immigration and got her back to Nigeria in November 2019. That was the beginning of our work. When she arrived, I was here in the United States. We had a video call, my friend and I, who work through this. And then I asked her, look, if this is happening to you, how many other girls like you are in these shoes? She told me, I could give you 20. I was expecting her to give me 3 or 4. It was a huge number. So I said, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have to create a WhatsApp group, put all of you in it, and start engaging. Let's even understand what's happening, because that's the fastest way we can talk to everybody at the same time. So we put everybody in the WhatsApp group, started to ask, and then I recruited a couple of my friends, like, I don't understand how we're going to figure this out, but we need to help these girls. God has put them in our hands. It needs to be done. So I brought in what we call volunteers, associates, volunteer case managers, who took on 2 or 3 girls, documented their cases. We taught them how to use Google location, identify your location, send us specific pictures that show us where you are. If we need to rescue you, how do we find you? What's the picture of your madam? What are the things, personal identifiable things that help us to identify where you are if we need to send in someone? And so we're able to, using that, get 2 girls in each month. So we did that in November, we did that in December. However, December, something happened. December, we had bought a ticket for a girl, sent the ticket to the girl. She was due to return December 5, and then she was due to return December 6. And then December 5, she places a call and says, I have been resold to another woman. This is my 4th place. I'm not sure I'll be able to get on that flight tomorrow. This was pre-COVID. A friend and I said, look, we can't just, it means that it's not just enough to buy tickets and harass immigration. This thing is more complex than it. So we sent out a link and said, anyone who was in trouble, join this link. In 3 days, we had 100 people join the link. That's a WhatsApp group. That told us this is a serious problem. And they were coming, and apparently because this was just one link. I mean, I'm not a celebrity or anything. Just put on your Facebook page and say, if you're in trouble, just join in. And the girls started to come in from Liberia, from Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iraq, West Africa. They came from Gambia, Kenya, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. So now we need to make a decision on who do we help first. So, like I said, we're not trained for this. At least handling it this way. Our approach was to talk to the most desperate person who cry out for help on the group. So we asked the prompting questions. Where are you? What's your situation? How can we help you? Video, can you send pictures? Can you send an address? And so one girl, the first girl who spoke up, said, look, well, I am in Cote d'Ivoire. I was told, okay, now, so this girl was a hairdresser in Nigeria, learning at a shop with her aunt, and then someone she doesn't know and still can't recall right now approached that aunt, promising her that this hairdressing trade she had would make more money doing the same thing in Spain. Good idea. So how do we get to Spain? This was a 23-year-old who has not finished. She finished senior secondary school too. Mm-hmm. She never went to the university. So she knows nothing about migration, knows nothing about passports, knows nothing about anything. Tickets from Abuja to Lagos. Arriving in Lagos, she thought she was boarding a plane to Spain, only to be told the person who is buying your tickets is in Cote d'Ivoire. Arriving in Cote d'Ivoire, said they visited a particular lady where they were supposed to spend the night, pending where they continue their trip tomorrow. They spent the night. By the time she woke up, the man who brought her there had disappeared. The woman who they came to sleep at her place said, you owe me 2 million CFA francs. She knows how. Well, the man who brought you, I paid him to bring you. You would have to work for me as a sex slave. She said she didn't understand. Sex slave, how, when, where? And then the madam said, this is what you're going to do. A sex slave would have to sleep with X number of men, make remittance, and you work for me over a 2-year period. If you're diligent, you'll be able to pay back my 2 million CFA francs, and then you can either start the business yourself or receive your freedom. So that story broke our hearts terribly. And we said, we needed to get this girl home urgently. So can you send us your location, the basic things? Because she didn't fly, she couldn't give us a flight route or location. So we had to go through the land borders. We had to get someone who could speak French, someone who could speak English, go through the land borders. It was a 24-hour trip, but she was eventually identified. Thanks. We're just talking with phones, WhatsApp, back and forth, and just, it was very messy, but we found her, brought her back to Lagos. Arriving in Lagos, we found a host family for her and placed her with that host family where she currently is. The host family we required because we knew that she couldn't go back to her parents immediately because they had expectations that their daughter had gone to Spain. And to think over those last 2 years, they had not made contact, so nobody knew where she was. She was sleeping with 15 men per day. So when she came, we had to take her for medicals, ran a lot of tests. She didn't have hepatitis, she didn't have HIV/AIDS, which was very good. Took her through trauma counseling over a 3-month period, but she kept complaining of stomach ache, which was very painful. And we tried everything, took her to the hospital, did all sorts of scans, nothing was forthcoming, nothing was showing. And then there's a practice they have in Nigeria when a woman just put to bed. So, in order for the blood to come out, they ask her to sit on a bowl of hot water. Hot water. And so we gave her that treatment, and condoms started coming out from her vagina. Several. Sorry, I know that's irritating. Those are the condoms that had broken in her. So think about how many men had gone through her, how many had broken in her. So she was very broken. We have worked with her over 1 year. She is just one case out of several. Since December 2019, we've been able to bring back till date 526 women and girls. But that's still a small number compared with those who are still out. As I speak to you, we still have 1,000 identified in Saudi Arabia. We have 800 in Oman, 800 in Lebanon, 353 in Oman. We have in Iraq, and scattered like that. And we keep asking them, speak up. Let's have the cases. Tell us your story. The thing is that, let me go to the issue of how they are recruited. Many times the recruitment is done by someone you trust. Recruitment is shared as an opportunity for economic prosperity. It is shared as an opportunity to improve your family. And girls get into it. I want to take care of my child. I want to take care of my family. My husband is not doing well enough. They tell them $2,000 sounds like a good idea. And they get there. It's only on arriving there that they find out it's not what you were promised. Then the recruiters also are online. Posing as they're both online and in what I call digital chat rooms. So just a few days ago, on a Christian library WhatsApp group, somebody, I want to read it verbatim to you. Somebody said on that group that he needed 20 ladies, Muslim ladies, to work as maids in Saudi Arabia. Remember, this is a Christian library. So I sent a private message to him asking him, what's the process? He says, call this number, Joseph X something Travel Limited. I said, well, how do I know? I mean, how would he know? You asked me to call him. He said, don't worry, the arrangement is sorted. So that's a simple way people, if I was a prospect, I just need to call Joseph X to probably put a lot of things in motion, and I start my immigration journey. On Instagram, there are several of them that post as travel agents. They post the opportunities as this: waiters job vacancy in Canada. Waiters wanted will earn $2,000 a month. Will earn $1,500 a month. You check the person who is recruiting for Canada is in UAE. That should be a red flag if you're educated. Sometimes we miss it. And these girls, on our chat group, I shared that opportunity. And all the girls were saying, I'm interested, I'm interested, I'm interested, I'm interested. And I had to take it as a learning opportunity to say, look, you didn't even probe this opportunity. You didn't ask where, when, how, where. You just say you're interested. Why are you interested? Can't you see the number is a +9 something number? That's not a Canadian number. So even the person who was recruiting, I asked him, where in Canada is this place? And he couldn't tell me. I said, what's the name of the city? Where will this job happen? What's the name of the hotel that is recruiting this number of waiters? And the person hiring couldn't exactly tell me, but got offended for me asking questions. So that's another thing. The traffickers usually do not like you asking questions. Once you show that you're knowledgeable, you become less prey, and they want to just kick you off. So knowledge is power, information is power. Looking at the other ways they recruit. Yes, another way that recruitment happens, packaged as a migration option, is through the girls themselves. So a girl has done 2 years. She's safely returned. On return, she what happened. She's looking good. She's dressed up well. Probably slept her way for 3 years. Has probably built a house. In the case of Nigeria, she's probably sent some money home because nobody knows what she's doing. When she returns, she also wants she wants to revenge against all those who sent her on this trip. So she comes around, she's good looking, she's rich, and then she goes, I can make your life better. So she now becomes an active recruiting agent. Goes and registers a limited liability company or an LLC or a travel agency and starts creating these opportunities and sharing them. Because she's been there, she knows the right words. Gets them. So to mitigate this, best advocates against trafficking would also be past victims. They do a better job sharing this information. Would be, I mean, in the case of Nigeria, for example, the people who recruit are very knowledgeable about the porous immigration systems. So, for example, there is a question on our questionnaire where we ask the girls, how did you leave the airport? And all of them, I mean all of them, without exception, all said they pay between 50,000 naira and 120,000 naira cash to the immigration officials at the exit point at the airport, which means that there is a collision between the traffickers and immigration. That's on that end. The other thing is, on arriving in the destination country, when the girls realize they're in trouble, they can't talk to anybody. They don't speak Arabic. They're stuck. And the slave masters are fully aware of this. They take full advantage. Full advantage meaning they can lie against you and say you stole something. And if you steal something, you know how mean it is in Arabic countries. You can be. We've had a lot of our girls. We've had to get people to speak Arabic to be able to get them out of jail. Because I can't speak Arabic, and the person I have to interact with to make that negotiation needs to be able to speak Arabic. What other challenge? I spoke about in Nigeria last year, May, we're able to put pressure on the Lebanese government to stop issuing domestic visas. And the moment you stopped issuing domestic visas, while it did not reduce the number of people still living, I had the opportunity to speak to a trafficker and ask, what's the plan now? And the person said, well, since they can't live through Nigeria, we'll take them to Sierra Leone or Senegal or Ghana and get travel documents for them there. And so a Nigerian will now be living as a Ghanaian, will get her fake birth certificates and all that. It will cost just about $500 to $800. So that was, let me just stop there.
Wow. Thank you so much, Omotola. That was some very useful information that we're still digesting. You just gave us a quick overview of the international situation going on with human trafficking. So thank you again. Thank you for your work. You said that you were able to save 526 girls. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You are a legend. I really appreciate you, and I thank God for your life. Ms. Lashandra, I want you to touch more on human trafficking in the United States. Is it mostly immigrants, as Omotola is saying, or do we have local recruitment as well? Like, I would like to know if you know the data there or experience as well.
So domestic trafficking happens just as much as immigration or refugee-based trafficking. I would say from my experience, it is not deeply different one from the other. I think there are a lot of things about being in the United States that sometimes don't realize have a lot of similarities to what people think is a third world country. But we are fortunate that there are some basic human rights that are there in the United States in larger portions. They're not everywhere, right? No nation is free of poverty. But because we've always been seen as a place that was helping everyone else by our own narrative, not necessarily because someone else said that they were helped by us or wanted to be helped by us, right? Because that's the culture. We've swept it under the rug for many years. When I started doing the work on domestic trafficking, it was simply based off of the definition, and the definition overlaps no matter where you are. So it took a long time to get people to believe that they had been trafficked. That was the first part. Because if you just believe the situation was only intimate partner violence, domestic partner violence, then you don't think you were trafficked. People who were staying in a hotel in a room in large portions because they had been recruited to come work hotel jobs. So they had 10, 12, 15 people in one room. They thought that was a fair condition, but that is labor trafficking. So a lot of people didn't believe they were trafficked, didn't see themselves in the definition until we started defining it publicly and helping people to get through that part. So it's both. And I have a theory, it's not fully tested, that our children that come here are young adults that are second generation, so came here through a family member that was a refugee or an immigrant, and then they came to America, their first generation, they spoke English maybe to their families. Those young people, I wouldn't say they are the same type of vulnerable, but they are a very unique group of young people who wear the signs of past abuse in a way that new abusers can recognize. And so it does make people more vulnerable if they've been through cycles of violence.
Lashandra, thank you so much for that. What I heard you say is sometimes the victim of domestic human trafficking are unaware that they are humanly trafficked. Omotola, is it the same or is it different internationally? Do they know they're being trafficked, unlike the domestic trafficking that occurs in the United States?
They usually don't know.
Mm-mm.
You see, in fact, what makes it horrific is that the girl thinks, so the girl is paying $1,000. She thinks she's getting a job. Just recruiting her in the home country, makes her sign a contract that when you get this job, you'll pay me a percentage of your earnings. So she has a promise of 2,000. She signs a contract that says she'll pay 10%. That's 200. The agent knows that she would earn 200, which is all of her salary, but he doesn't tell her that. Then she moves to the country. Arriving in the destination country, there's an agent waiting to receive her. That agent needs to be paid because that agent sourced for her from the home country agent. So you see, there's a lot of money in between. Now, the original, the final buyer, the final customer who she would have to work with, found her on a website that she didn't even know exists, that she doesn't even know exists. Listed on that website, the list of things she's able to do. She will be a nanny, all sorts of ridiculous things are in those contracts that are listed. Has a picture, it has a passport number, it has her age, it has every data she entered when she filled the registration form in the home country. So she's listed on an e-commerce site as a She's not aware. So she thinks she's getting a sales job. She thinks she's getting an administrative job. It's only when she arrives that she realizes she's going to be working as a domestic.
Wow. Omotola, this question is for you.
Okay.
Are the human traffickers so emboldened that they don't know they're breaking laws? Like, I mean, are they persecuted when they are caught, or do people look, the other way and allow this to continue to perpetuate? Like, it seems like these people don't care. Like, I'm concerned about.
They don't care.
They don't care. Go ahead.
One, they don't care. Two, they use all the tools of power, oppression, fear, and you see, you need to be able to control a victim and make the victim not think of themselves as a person, as a product. So how do they do that? When you're leaving, they say, we want to take care of you. We don't want you to be harassed. So turn in your passports for safekeeping. What the girls don't know is that they're never getting back those passports. Turn in your phones for safekeeping. So if you're stripped of your phone and stripped of your passport, who knows you? They know that's where you can control the victim. And they get to the destination country, but the language. You don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you don't know the labor laws. No one is going to take you through an orientation before you resume work. So you resume work into a culture you don't know. You're resuming work into, particularly in the Middle East, where it's a very repressive and oppressive culture. The women who are citizens are sometimes treated as subhuman beings. Now, when the girls go to work in those homes, the women there also feel threatened, like you're trying to come to my house and you're pretty. My husband will be attracted to you. I'm fully dressed in puder, so he doesn't see me. So the girl has to contend with the wife, has to contend with the husband who is probably philandering and would touch her several times in the course of her work during the day. She can't report to her madam. So there are many things. So it's the control. Once the oppressor can control the victim, even they do the control even before they leave the home country. They say things, for example, in Nigeria, they say things like, God wants to prosper you. Share that information with anyone. If you share it with anyone, they may destroy it, they may jinx it. And so the people who are embarking on this trip, some of them don't tell their family members. They just up and go. And when you can up and go, that's very useful for the oppressor, because then no one is going to be asking, where are you? And there's no one to ask about you. The less people, so it's information, it is working in secrecy. And remember, it's a $150 billion a year industry. So there are people who are profiting from it. It's a highly organized, it's a business. So I think many times when we advocate, we don't treat it as a business. Personally, for us, we lost someone last year to track a trafficker. She was killed because she was going to work as an undercover agent. But her line was bugged and they found some of the conversations that we had earlier. They killed her. She was chopped with a machete. Killed like that. She was 28. She was supposed to get married in April last year, but she was killed in January. Her only offense was trying to track a trafficker. And one of the things this person kept saying is that, who are you to come and destroy my business?
Wow. Omotola, that is so unfortunate. May the soul of this young lady that sacrificed herself for this work be honored. Lashandra, you and Omotola keep using the word slavery to describe human trafficking. When we think of slavery, at least in the United States, we think of transatlantic slavery. So is this the same or is this different? Can you guys both, starting with Lashandra, state to me why you consider this slavery, and if in World Health Organization and other organizations that govern what we do consider this a slavery? Thank you.
So we may have technically abolished slavery in the United States, but we instituted several systemically racist practices to keep the same effects of slavery, and that is controlling a population of people that are poor. And so when you look at it from that perspective, and the percentage of Black-born Americans who have not met the economic success that some of their peers have that are white. The evidence shows up in systemic things for the continuation of slavery. And so in this new era, in this stage of racism on display, we can no longer pretend that the things that are defined in our face are not true. And I did not write that human trafficking definition. That was written on the United Nations level. And the final category within how trafficking occurs is slavery. But each of the things above that list are a form of practice that happened so that slavery and the transatlantic slave trade could be possible. Whether it was a relationship to some African-born folks to build a strategy to get others for slavery, or it was the carrying out of slavery, both did the same thing. And they're still in play across the globe. The United States may have been the latest customer, but they are just the nation that didn't give up on it the quickest. Other nations have hit it in new ways. Other nations have changed it. And one of the ways they change it is they run away from words like human trafficking, because it is the exact definition: being carried over a boundary against your will to work and never have freedom is human trafficking. And if you take off the connotations that we've given it with prostitution, solicitation, and sex trade specifically, if we take that out of the conversation and we just look at it as Black people's bodies have not ever been their own, as long as this structure, the colonization of the world, has existed. And so it should be something that is coming from our souls at this point. As people of color across the diaspora, we should be reverberating the truth about trafficking without othering people who've gone through some of the stories that we're sharing today. They are just the ones that people feel like, oh, those are the worst cases. All the cases are bad, and the bad cases that we don't think are as bad make it possible for the worst cases to occur. And so if we don't stop it and nip it in the bud when we see the definition, because the definition is plain: coercion, force, and fraud. If you just remember those three words, because that is the means by which it's carried out. It is impossible for you to look at those three words and not associate it with forms of slavery. And transatlantic slave, of course, is not the only slavery that's ever happened in the globe. Absolutely. But it's the reality of the fact that we got to stop ignoring that that's in there. They put it in there for a reason, because it was an atrocity and we shouldn't be doing it anymore. But it is exactly what was already said. This is big business, and people are making a great deal of money off of this. The contractor that was trafficking both US citizens out of the United States, but people from across the globe into the United States, they were a customer that was working with the United States. They were providing a service to the United States by being there. So if that's not continuation and perpetration of the issue, I don't know what is.
Wow, thank you so much, Lashandra. I mean, that definition, calling it slavery, makes me feel like we need to do more. Because when we think about slavery, we think of those that were silent during slavery, right? Transatlantic slavery. But human trafficking slavery, we're here. And you guys are not silent, but a lot of us are silent. And it's like, wow, we have an opportunity to rewrite history, and most of us don't. I guess that's why Alaafia is bringing this educational webinar today, so that we can each understand human trafficking as modern day slavery, so that we all have a role to play in stopping this. So I thank you guys again. Omotola, do you want to define or give your own perspective on why this is modern day slavery?
Well, even though we use the term modern day slavery, I like to think that slavery never ended. And if we approach it that way, we would treat it with the urgency that it requires. What happened? It's true that people, the transatlantic slave trade, people were stolen against their will. There's no difference between that and now. What makes this worse is that people are paying to get into slavery. People are willingly, voluntarily entering into slavery with the promise of economic prosperity. At least when you were stolen as a slave in the 14 or 1500s, you knew you were stolen and you had no hope. But how do you have hope that you are going to work and end up as a sex slave, just like the picture of the girl I painted? She was 23. When we brought her back, she was 25. That was not what she planned for herself. I also suspect that the aunt who told her she was going to Spain profited from that arrangement. The aunt probably profited from that arrangement. The man who took her profited from the arrangement. The woman who is running the business, running the brothel, it's okay having several girls and bringing her money with which she's building. That's disgusting. I also think that it doesn't get enough publicity. So people don't understand how bad it is. People don't understand that the person recruiting could be your next door neighbor. It's someone you trust, a church member, a family member, someone you have been vulnerable with to say, I have a challenge, I have a problem, I'm trying to get a job. And then this slavery is presented to you as a pathway to economic prosperity, only for them to end up being slaves. That's why I also think that when we use the word slavery, people get it immediately, how bad it is. Human trafficking still sounds very colorful, which is what it is, but slavery just cuts to the heart of it, because these people have no rights. I want to just quickly read, this is one of the books that I work with, and the writer had a few things to say. I just want to read several cases of, just brief cases, so you have an idea of, these things didn't happen 10 years ago. All of this has happened within the last 2 to 5 years. And these are cases of girls. Would I say they were executed? The deadly parts of their, I'm trying to find, I wanted to just read their stories to you, because the stories are very horrific. Yeah. So I'm going to just briefly, Latifa, who is from Ghana, country of destination.
Can you tell us the name of the book for our audience willing to buy it, please?
Deadly Work, Decent Work.
Okay, thank you. Deadly Work, Decent Work.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Latifa, we call this a Hall of Fame for kafala, appealing for kafala. The book had to be hurriedly written because there was a girl last year from Ghana who cried out for help, needed to escape her slave master. Let's say she told us on a Friday, we're working through the process. Before the weekend was over, we had learned that she jumped to her death, suicide. But we know it wasn't suicide. We know she was killed. But we can't prove it. But we have other cases. Latifa from Ghana worked in Kuwait. Latifa Adams suffered constant abuse and subsequent severe burns after her employer's children tampered with the kitchen stove to an explosion in the kitchen. It unknowingly turned on the stove. The employer delayed response to her, worsened her flight, and she died on her way to Ghana. Namzam from Ethiopia, who worked in Saudi Arabia, she was executed for slashing the throat of her employer's child as revenge for mistreatment. Whose remains were found in a fridge. Wait, so these things are really, really bad, and all of this is within the last 3 to 5 years. But a lot of these stories are not told. These girls, you report it once and then it just disappears. Nobody follows up. But this is happening every day. As I speak to you, I've been on a call this morning, both to Oman and to Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, for some girls who are currently in incarceration, locked up. You live in a big house where you sleep on the corridor. You live in a big house where you sleep in the toilet. You are given food like a dog. I mean, what could be worse than that?
Wow, Omotola, man, the work you do is just phenomenal. Thank you again for trying to abolish modern day slavery, or as you say, continuation of slavery. Ms. Lashandra, you talked about the Human Trafficking Task Force, which you helped create or on whatnot. What has been the impact? What year was it created? And are we keeping like case reports or statistics to document the impact of this task force in Milwaukee?
Yeah, so I am, there is more than one task force. There is the community task force, which is one of the ones that I was a co-founder of. And that one sits within the Office of Violence Prevention in the Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And then there is a joint human trafficking task force. So the federal agencies established district task forces around trafficking cases being tried in the United States. So there's a Southeastern Wisconsin district trafficking task force. But then we also have in Wisconsin an anti-human trafficking consortium that's statewide with two coalitions, Wisconsin Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And so when we were doing these recommendations, all those groups were involved in the conversations as leaders in that issue area. And in my case, in the case of the task force that we established that was community-based, it was a request from a legislator. So I think one of the things is a legislator just asked, would you want to start a task force on that? And we were like, sure. And so I think sometimes nothing beats a failure but a try. These were things that were in the recommendations. They're at the US State Department. So if you were interested in starting a task force, you would just need to take the Women, Peace, and Security Act document to your state, to your city, and talk to your legislators. It was just that simple. But you know, the truth of the matter is I don't know the impact of the task force fully. I do not work on the task force anymore. And this is something that's very important for people who do this work. I was very frontline for many years. And I stepped away because there was a point when I was burning out to what seemed like a no return. And so instead of going all the way down the spiral, I completely put everything down professionally in domestic violence and sexual assault work. I put everything down around human trafficking as something that pays me. So I will show up to the work to help a specific thing happen, but the playbook already exists for the United States. For the globe, it's the United Nations Security Resolution 1325. So that document is the recommendations that happened at the Commission on Status of Women, their conferences, and then I don't think they do a shadow report every year. I want to say shadow reports may happen by issue area on a calendar, but shadow reports are received on each commission every time they do a call. And so you can go with what's wrong in your state, what's wrong in your county, what's wrong in your city, and carry it to the United Nations and bring it back home to your city and say, you know, this is what other cities like us are doing. You could do this as well.
Lashandra, thank you so much for that. Ms. Omotola, you said something about human trafficking not getting enough publicity, which, yes, it should. Are you guys aware of this, I guess, movie on Netflix called Omotola by Kenneth Gaines?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I'm aware of even the journalist, the person whose story I'm aware of her.
Okay. Do you want to briefly summarize the movie without giving it away so that our participants can go watch it? So my question on that movie, after you summarize it, is that realistic?
It's actually, it happened. And if you like to talk to the person it happened to, that's something that we can arrange. She's my friend. I know her personally. It's a real story.
Wow, we would love to do a comeback if our producer will allow us to, but it would be good to hear her story because that movie was just so moving. Lashandra, I don't know if you know of the movie. It's on Netflix. Omotola is going to say the name and briefly just summarize it without giving away the content so that the participants can go watch it themselves. So Omotola, back
Yeah,
to you.
so Olotore is basically about an undercover journalist who goes undercover, infiltrates the camp of and walks through the world of sex trafficking, recruiting, transportation, walking through what I say the evils of trafficking, the subjugation girls have to go through, the control. And she experiences a lot of not just physical pain, but mental pain, torture, trauma. The movie ends abruptly, if you recall. And we're still hoping there'll be a part two of it. So traumatic. It just walks you through the life of the original person whose story was written about uh on that expedition because her friend killed on a similar trip. And so she went undercover to understand what was happening and what led to the death. I mean, people were being beheaded. They have to swear oaths before they're taken on the trip. That's pretty horrific things going on there. Like you said, it is control. God, I think, did not create man to dominate man. And slavery is designed around man controlling another man, the stripping of willpower from an individual. And when your willpower is taken, when your power of decision making, power of choice is taken away, it affects your self esteem. A space of pain, of trauma. A lot of these girls, it's not even enough to bring them back. You need to take them to trauma counseling. You need to walk them through you are a person. We have affirmations that we make them say every day till they believe it. We get them to speak to therapists who volunteer with us. At least give us like 4 sessions per girl, so that hopefully we may be able to make a difference. If so, it's horrific. Say the least.
Wow. So Lashandra and Omotola, do you guys feel that this is an uphill battle? It's $150 billion industry, and I think there are more what you call recruiters than advocates against it. Like, are you guys going to win this war, or do you feel like your goal is to raise awareness and then have the community participate in the abolition of this form of slavery? Lashandra, your take, and then Omotola.
So I don't exercise hope anymore. I think blame it on 8 years of a president using hope as a mantra. Maybe that's the reason that I don't. But I will say we already know what needs to be done. And we don't have any new work to do. We just need to get people to do the work they're not doing right now. And I've been at this for 20 years, if I count before it became trafficking specific and it was working in social services overall. But the last 10 years has been a very, very important time for Black women in leadership in nonprofit. So that specifically, and that meant that people were taking this issue seriously for the first time in the United States over the last 5 years. And we had been saying this for 10. So to have some traction on people actually recognizing that the United Nations makes treaties and writes recommendations for how to change laws took me almost 10 years for people to realize that I didn't have to do it. Everyone could do it. Um, and I think our biggest problem is getting people to lose their own chains. It's less about, for me, and I'm at a specific vantage point now because I've stepped away from being on the ground. And what I believe our biggest barrier is not the hope of those who have lost everything, but those who are doing nothing to change anything willfully. And they will not be left to sit there and do what they've always been able to get away with for much longer.
Wow, thank you. Omotola, what's your take on that? Is this an uphill battle? Is there hope? Or is there a need for community recruitment in terms of advocacy?
In my language, we say if you want to catch a monkey, you must behave like the monkey. You must know the roots of the monkey, walk the pathway of the monkey. I try to pick a monkey and use the same baits I would use to get a fish. The same way, if we're going to win this battle, first we need to be humble enough to know that we don't know. A lot of those who are supposed to make the laws have a posture of arrogance, a posture of, oh, is it unjust? It's not just. Like I mentioned earlier, the recruiting is so invisible. You can't track it or trace it. There isn't a science to it. But it is, even though there isn't a science to it, it's informal but organized. They know who, when, where. If we're going to win this battle, we need to go preventive instead of rescuing. And the way we do prevention is to empower people to ask questions when an opportunity is brought to you. In communities, are there migration centers where a 15-year-old girl who is promised to be taken abroad can walk in and inquire what's the name of, someone said they were taking her to Alberta in Australia. And I had to tell her there is no Alberta in Australia. Alberta is in Canada. But she didn't know this. Where did she get that information? There needs to be people in community, maybe a local government, where she can walk in and say, well, there's this opportunity. Who can help me? The recruitment, there needs to be information available in schools, available in churches, available in mosques, available around. In Nigeria, for example, where we work actively, we have an agency, National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, which is doing a lot. But they put billboards at the airport when the girls are leaving. When a girl is leaving, she's not checking your billboard. She's gone. She's ready to leave. So she's not in a hurry. At that time, she's not interested in any signages. She's looking forward to getting on that flight. Billboards need to be closer home where she can ask, what does trafficking mean? And someone can explain to her. We need to have call centers where people can call when they're in trouble. Helplines. I know that there is one in the United States, but let there be so many where people can call. And then we need to cooperate. Sharing of data, sharing of information, responsiveness. When a girl is in trouble, let's treat it like a medical emergency. Let's not assume, treat it as if if we don't respond, this person is in trouble. The best advocates also would be those who have been victims, because they can go back and say, this is why you must not enter. They need to be resourced, empowered, continue the conversations. We also need to dispense the conversations at the same channels where they get it. They get this information on radio. They get it online. We need to train people for fraudulent recruitment activity online that are posted as jobs, posted as tourist opportunities, posted as, all of those things. It takes time, but it will take an army, no single individual. And just like Lashandra said, it can get tiring. I recall there was a time I was so tired, I didn't want to pick my phone. Like I wanted to just like shut it down, like I'm done. That happens to all. You can reach burnout. Like uh, there needs to be also care for those who are also trying to support, so that they don't burn out. Uh, Possible, the media will be helpful in amplifying the stories, not reporting it as a single event, but reporting it as a pandemic that's killing all of us. If they give it that level of urgency and train, I know that some airlines train air hostesses to identify trafficking victims. So we need to train as many informal means or to be able to spot a trafficking victim. Small information packets here and there.
Wow, thank you again, Omotola, for the tips. So the last question here is, do you guys think social media has helped you as an advocate or has helped the recruiters more? What is the role of social media in human trafficking propagation or abolition? We can start with Lashandra and then Omotola can end the dialogue. Mm-hmm.
So before I transitioned out, there were a lot of challenges about testimony. So in the United States, most of the time, if you are part of a trial for a trafficker being convicted, you have to accuse your accuser in court. And so that means that sometimes young people who don't understand the proximity issue of being in the same city after you've sent someone to jail for trafficking can be a blind spot for repercussions. And so, and this doesn't even get to the social media stuff. This just gets to the street. So when we've identified trafficking as an issue, people were sent to jail for trafficking very early on, and they didn't do a great job with those victims, keeping them safe, getting them out of Milwaukee. Like one of the key things is we need to start thinking about this web of sister and brotherhood for survivors in a more realistic way. To your point about the phone number, that could very well have a global implication for the US hotline, but the US hotline doesn't always do the best possible connecting in the cities in the United States. So that interconnected web often is the challenge. Now, traffickers are crafty. People seeking to make money in general tend to be crafty. So if we take the negative connotation off of that, that is a characteristic of someone who's usually wealthy, who's successful. But in this field, it means they're agile, they move faster. When one machine is shut down, they are already on another one. They were already on the other one when that one got shut down. And the tools are coming and going faster. I remember Backpage was a big conversation in the United States about, girls were being taken through Backpage and taking gigs for like dancing and also for prostitution through Backpage, but were never coming home again. And so these were things that we knew existed in this underground way, but social media took off and then took off again in 2020 because of the restrictions of COVID. And so some things I can't assess yet, right? The way that 2020 ran, I have no idea the impact it's had on trafficking specifically. I can tell you it's had a huge impact on intimate partner violence, and how people made it to a bed at a shelter has been deeply impacted by social media challenges. If somebody breaks up with her boyfriend and puts the pictures on social media, she could potentially be in a situation, and I'm using boyfriend as the term is used amongst the young ladies and young men. They're not calling them all pimp, to be really clear. They're not calling them their traffickers, their boyfriend or their girlfriend. But that person is, going back into the world and in major danger of the individual who they've just shared that they've had violence with. That person is also going to probably retaliate, and others will be harmed, things like that. So those things still go on. Those will always be the problem. And because this is such an underground industry, the numbers that we give in the billions are an estimate of what we can find. We have no idea how many of our dark dollars are associated to trafficking. And we won't know until, with Bitcoin and the blockchain, I'm hoping that there will be some accidental awareness of line of sight and where money has come from. But there's tracing the money of the sex trade is nearly impossible. And then when you take into other considerations of trafficking, organ harvesting and labor, those are purposely off the books and off of the internet. So that one we can't even fully assess because it is not tracked. But what we do know that is tracked, like hotel industries and the time frame of sporting events, tells us in the United States much of what we need to know about prostitution. And so as a result, we can know what we need to know about trafficking, because where there are sporting events, there are customers. So we've learned to track trends for those of us that are still in the work and try and get ahead of it. But it goes back to the point of we're not preventing it, we're chasing it still because it's so agile.
Wow, thank you so much, Lashandra. Omotola, can you touch on that in terms of, has social media helped you as an advocate, or has it emboldened recruiters?
My answer would be both. On our part, it has helped because at least the girls, a lot of those we've been able to work with, have mostly found us on social media. What I don't know is if that is good enough and the reach. We try to form different small groups, put them community support groups of 10, groups of 15, to support each other and make sure that they're talking to each other. So if I put, usually, because you put them in, if it's a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group, appoint a governor for them, appoint a deputy, appoint a governor and 2 deputies from amongst themselves. And the 3 of them have the responsibility of making sure you check on everyone in your group each week. So that's helpful, dependent on if they have access to Wi-Fi at their location. So if the phones are taken away, that yanks them off. But the boss decides, I'm cutting you off the Wi-Fi. What has social media helped us to do? Social media has helped us to also shame prosecutors or traffickers. So for the Middle East, for example, we understand that one thing the Middle Easterns do not like is shame. They don't like anything called public shaming. Yet some of the issues that our girls have, to know which channel to do what. Mob action fast and get a lot of people talking about what you want to talk about. We go to Twitter. We mention relevant agencies or influencers to join the conversation. We talk about the Omani police or the kingdom of the Omani kingdom, Omani Sultanate of Oman. I'm just using Oman as an example. That there will be Omanis on that who want to defend their country. And so we say, well, help us fish this person out. If you say you're that good. So that's been helpful, positively. We've also used social media to get help, faith-based organizations nearby, temporary shelters, organizations on ground. A lot of those countries have never been there, but we work with several organizations. For example, in Lebanon, one organization that's been very helpful with us, this is Lebanon, Syrian Eyes, Lenya Lenya, Caritas. Some of them provide us with temporary shelter for the girls, where some of them help us to escape or pick up the girls, walk them through. So social media has been helpful with the communication. However, the same way, also an easy way for the recruiters to also recruit the girls. We hope that if we are able to strengthen the knowledge and education that goes out about identifying a recruiter, perhaps when the girls become their own advocates, it goes beyond just one person or one organization. We need to recruit more people to be advocates against. And then basically the simple thing about being a brother's keeper is important. I'm constantly scanning, maybe because it's my job. I'm constantly scanning an opportunity, constantly scanning. Somebody puts up, I'm checking where, how, what's the process, and asking questions. Maybe more people should just do that once a day or so.
Thank you so much again, Omotola and Lashandra, for spending almost 90 minutes today with us, educating our community on ways to understand human trafficking. We are very, very grateful. Thank you again. There are some key take-home points that I want all of us to reflect on this week and the week coming or in the future. Some of the points that you both have addressed or brought to our forefront is, one, the role of victims to stop the practice. Omotola stressed it. Just because you were once a victim doesn't mean you should continue the cycle. You should take it upon yourself, as Omotola said, to be your sister's keeper and prevent another girl from going through that path. We must break the cycle. Another thing that we both all learned from you guys is knowledge is power. And that's why we're doing events like this, and we hope to continue with this dialogue. Another point is to work as a team. All advocates should come together and work as a team. As Lashandra says, the frontline workers in this advocacy against human trafficking get burnt out because sometimes they work in isolation. So it's imperative that all frontline workers against human trafficking come together and work as a team. There is power in numbers. I think that's basically it. And Omotola, you said this is a $150 billion industry. I don't know if you have $150 billion to counteract the effect, but I hope people there, if you guys can make some donation. Omotola, you can tell them how to make donation to support you and the work you do. And for us, we will continue to pray for both of you. Lashandra, thank you again. And Omotola, if you want to talk about how people can help fund your organization, because you're doing a fantastic job. Go ahead, Omotola.
Okay. For now, what we do, okay, because I'm here in the United States, I just collect, people could give PayPal, I'll just my email address, or people, if you want to give Zelle, let me just type it. Should I type it in the?
Yeah, type it in and then I'll read it. Okay. I'll read it out. Okay. So yes, let's all support people that work against human trafficking, because it's our duty as a brother and sister's keeper to do just that. And Omotola, yes, I'm waiting for Omotola to write down the information, and then we're going to read it out. And our Alaafia producer would include this on our discussion comment for those that want to help fight against this modern day slavery. All right. So again, you can find the information on Alaafia page on Facebook, and in the comment section, you can get omotola.fawumi@gmail.com. Again, that's Omotola Fawumi's information. It's just basically spelled the same way as her name is listed on the screen, omotola.fawumi@gmail.com.
That's for PayPal.
That's for PayPal, correct. And you can email her too if you have any comment or if you want her or Lashandra to come and speak to you guys or your organization. Again, thank you. This event is hosted by me, Dr. Azuma, and this is sponsored by the Alaafia organization. Alaafia is an educational platform, empowerment platform, where we do monthly dialogue on things that impact women. We want to be that change agent that will stop modern day slavery. Again, thank you everyone, and we hope you will tune in again for our next event. Thank you so much, Lashandra. Thank you so much, Omotola, for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.